He walked into the euthanasia wing without a cane, without a guide, and said 3 words no one expected. "Open the cage." The dog inside, labeled dangerous, lowered his head, took one breath, and the room forgot how to breathe. They'd taped a red sticker to the crate like a verdict. "Final notice," it read, in block letters that didn't care about history or loyalty or the miles a pair of paws had run for a flag. Outside, rain stitched gray lines across the windows of the overworked military kennel. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed over rows of cages and stainless steel sinks. Somewhere a drain clicked and echoed. The world had gotten small and sterile. In the last cage on the left lay a German shepherd they called Rex in the field and Unit K9014 on paper. He had a scar that split his ear and an old harness scuffed to suede. Files said unmanageable. The rumor mill said worse, unstable since handler KIA. The truth was simpler and harder. Grief had nowhere to go in a dog trained to be brave, so it curdled into stillness and then into fear. Fear, misread by busy people, looks a lot like aggression. A tech in blue gloves slid the latch, heard the clang, and didn't meet the dog's eyes. 2 hours, he muttered to no one, setting a clipboard down. Then we're done. The door at the far end creaked. A man walked in, alone. No white stick, no escort, no hesitation. His fingers traced the wall once, the way you touch an old photograph, then fell to his sides. The staffer recognized the haircut before the name. Close, stubborn, regulation, even after discharge. The man's irises were pale and unfocused. His gaze landed somewhere a fraction to the left of what most people called eye contact. "Sergeant Mason Ryland?" the tech asked, voice shrinking inside the tiled room. "Just Mason now," the man replied softly. "Is that him?" The staffer swallowed. "Yes, Sergeant. That's the one. He's classified as—" "Open it," Mason said. "No theatrics, no volume either, just a quiet that cut through a lot of years. Sir, he's high risk, Open it." The tech's hands trembled as he worked the latch because all the warnings in all the binders were suddenly just air. Metal whispered against metal. The door swung. Rex stepped into the threshold and froze. Muscles coiled, eyes dark, ears forward. There was a low sound in his throat, neither a growl nor a whine, like a question translated into sound. Mason didn't move. He didn't reach. He didn't say the universal sit or stay. He just let the moment settle, like dust after a blast. "You remember me," he said, more statement than question. "I'm the one you dragged when the world went white." Silence stretched. A paw lifted and set down. Another. Rex closed the distance in 2 quiet steps and pressed a cold nose to the back of Mason's knuckles. The breath he let out was long, like something unwound in his chest. The staffer forgot to stand. The clipboard hit the floor. When Rex finally sat, it wasn't the crisp obedience of a field drill. It was surrender. The kind you offer not from fear, but from relief. He leaned into Mason's leg as if rediscovering a wall that used to hold the roof up. Mason's hand found the scarred ear and thumbed the ridge where a stitch had once tugged. No one said a word. No one had to. 3 years earlier, the world had been larger and louder. Desert wind. Antennas rattling against a Humvee. Voices on a headset ricocheting between checkpoints and call signs. Sergeant Mason Ryland and Rex were a unit then. Fear turned into purpose. Breath into rhythm. Rex had what the handlers joked was a sixth sense for traps, finding the seam in the dirt that meant a wire, the silence that meant company. He wasn't the smartest dog or the fastest. He was the one who listened to the ground. The blast didn't announce itself. It just happened. A ribbon of road folded up like paper. Mason remembered heat and the inside of his helmet slamming the world into a narrow tunnel. He remembered trying to find the sky and finding only darkness. He remembered that when his legs wouldn't listen and his eyes couldn't report in, something dragged him. Cloth thrummed. Harness webbing bit into his ribs. A body planted itself above him, hot and heavy and shaking. He tried to say go and got mud in his teeth. He tried to say good and got blood. The rotors of the medevac chopped the horizon, and as men in green hands pried him from the dirt, he heard a sound from the dog he'd never heard before. Not a bark, not a growl, a sound like a heart splitting, one brief, helpless whimper. The field hospital became a corridor of days. Lights on, pain in, lights off, paper whispers. When they told him the verdict, the words sounded like they belonged to someone else. You'll see shapes, maybe light, not faces, not detail. When they moved him stateside, the quiet got stranger. He learned the routes of his kitchen by counting tiles, learned the shape of grief by its weight. The world, which had once been a wide map with pins in it, became a floor plan he could walk at night without stubbing his toe. They told him Rex had gone back into rotation, then failed his eval, then bit a trainer, then paced himself raw. Unfit, a voice over a thin connection said, like it was discussing a boot with a cracked sole. Mason said nothing. The whimper lived inside the space where words failed. Months became habits, habits became armor. One morning, the world fractured again, this time not with shrapnel, but with a digital note in an old handler's group chat. Beneath a thread about someone's retirement cake, a leaked screenshot broke the banter, a dog ID and a schedule, and a red line block that said what red stickers always say. The name field read K9014. Mason's hands shook like he'd been back on that road. He didn't call a lawyer. He didn't call a friend. He just stood up and found his shoes and left a door swinging on its hinges. Adoption wasn't a form so much as a war of memos. The kennel chief, a woman with a voice like unpolished stone, met him in the hall, papers already raised like a shield. Mr. Ryland, with respect, this animal is flagged. We follow protocol. With respect, Mason said, protocol doesn't know him. We can't release a high-risk canine to a civilian with a disability. I was a Marine with this disability, he said evenly. The moment after your dog saved my life. It's not that simple. It never is. That's why we need people in the room. Her sigh sounded like a door closing, but then she surprised him. You want to be in the room? She asked. Fine. Behavioral eval in 10 minutes. If he fails, I can't help you. In a training bay that smelled like bleach and fear, they built a gauntlet. A metal tray dropped to simulate gunfire. A stranger in a padded sleeve approached at an angle meant to trigger territorial response. A recorded rotor thumped from a speaker. Because some genius thought pain could be graphed, the evaluator, a man whose face had been carved into a single raised eyebrow, stood with a pen poised like a blade. When they brought Rex in, he was a silhouette of tension. Mason didn't say heel or down. He said gently, Rex, it's me. The tray clanged. Rex flinched. His ears pivoted. His gaze went not to the noise, but to the man whose hand he'd memorized. He moved to Mason's left side, pressed a shoulder to a thigh like a brace. The stranger came with the sleeve. Hips angled, arms flared, the way aggression telegraphs itself before it becomes action. Rex's hackles rose. There was the warning, but he didn't lunge. He didn't snap. He placed himself between Mason and the approach path, weight forward, head still, issuing a low sound that said, not your target, not today. Then, the rotor sound boomed. Mason went somewhere else for a fraction, because sounds time travel when you don't want them to. He swayed. The evaluator's pen paused. Rex turned away from the speaker, not interested, and nudged Mason's knee with his muzzle, insistent, steady. A dog version of, I'm here. Find the floor. Find me. The evaluator stared like he was seeing a new color. He wrote slowly. The kennel chief's mouth moved, but whatever words wanted to come didn't clear the runway. High risk? Mason said quietly. Or high guard? The chief's shoulders lowered. There's a clause, she admitted, almost grudging. In the old regs, handler bond exception. It's buried, and no one uses it because no one's usually willing to fight this hard. Someone should have, Mason said. Maybe someone just did. She signed. A week later, nobody wrote a headline, because quiet victories never trend. Someone in records updated a database entry. K9014, removed from termination list. Status, adopted. Note, reassigned to veteran. Visual impairment. Mason moved to a small town that smelled like sea salt and coffee. The first harness he used for Rex wasn't a sleek official one. It was the old field harness, clipped to a length of rope he'd sanded smooth. Because the past isn't something you throw away. It's raw material for the future. They retrained each other. Mason learned a new set of cues, left, right, curb, and Rex learned to swap adrenaline for patience. They failed beautifully at first. Rex stopped dead at fire hydrants that he filed under metal danger. and Mason learned to laugh in a way that shook off more dust than he'd realized he was still carrying. They volunteered at a rehab center for injured vets. The first day, a young soldier with a cast, still wearing the smell of hospital disinfectant, sat on a bench and refused to look at anyone. He stared at a stain on the tile, as if the stain knew something he didn't. Rex walked over, sighed, and set his chin on the man's knee, with the kind of gravity that says, "I'm not here to entertain you, I'm here to anchor you." The casted hand, suspicious and slow, drifted down. For 3 minutes, the room didn't exist. Afterward, the soldier said nothing, just showed up the next day without being asked. Not every wound bleeds where others can see it. Not every bandage goes on the outside. Sometimes the world tested them anyway. Once on the boardwalk, a truck backfired just as a kid dropped a skateboard. Sound, motion, echoes. An old storm front that had followed Mason across an ocean rolled in quick. His knees felt like glass. Rex didn't bolt or scan for targets. He pressed himself close, head against Mason's thigh, weight against shin, the exact kind of pressure that pulls a man back into his own body. When the boy mumbled, "Sorry," Mason found his voice and said, "You're okay, we're okay." Rex flicked an ear, as if to say, but firm. In small ways, the universe kept sending them proof that the labels had been wrong. The hardware store owner added a water bowl near the counter and never once asked for a selfie. A neighbor, who had once avoided the dangerous dog, now brought over a ball that had lost its bounce. At the clinic, the vet who'd whispered, "I heard the story," squeezed Mason's shoulder and said, "You two are what saves people like me from quitting this job." Not all debts are payable. Mason knew that, so did Rex. Some endings come with trumpets and medals. This one arrived with a folding chair and a microphone that squealed once before it behaved. The VA had asked Mason to say a few words at a small ceremony, the kind where people clap with their hands and their hearts at the same time. He didn't want to be anyone's inspiration. Inspiration is heavy and slippery, and often picked up by the wrong end. But he also knew silence is a kind of permission, and he'd spent too many months letting the wrong story be the loud one. He stood, Rex sat. The room did that soft settle people do when they want to hear truth without perfume. "They said my dog was too dangerous," Mason began, voice steady as a held breath. "They said I was too broken. We weren't either of those things. We were just unfinished. Grief changes shape if you give it a job. So does fear, so does love." He reached down without looking and found the place between Rex's ears where a thumb could rest like it belonged there. "He saved me twice," he said. "Once in the sand when I lost my sight. Once in a tiled room when I was about to lose my reason. If you're writing the file, write that down too." Nobody cried loudly. They just breathed differently, which is its own kind of standing ovation. After the ceremony, a little girl approached with a homemade card that had too much glitter to be legal. "He's a hero," she declared, pointing at Rex. Mason smiled. "He is," he said. "So are you, for seeing it. There are 1,000 ways for a story like this to get lost, under paperwork, under policy, under the quick, cruel efficiency of people who think labels are facts. But sometimes the right person walks into the wrong room, at the perfect time, and says a thing that splits the script in half. Open it. Sometimes the dog everyone calls too much is just waiting for the one voice that sounds like home. Sometimes the man who can't see is the only one who still recognizes what's right in front of him. If this story moved you, even a little, tap like, share it with someone who needs to believe in second chances, and drop one word in the comments, karma. Because what you send out has a way of finding its way back, just like a good dog does, nose to the wind. Straight and sure, all the way home.